Velocities in music. Today, we're going to do... Is this a request? It's a 2010 album. It's called The Orchard. So. It's by Riot. I know somebody said we had to review a Riot album.
Well, we were going to anyway.
Well, we're going. It's 2010, so we're like, yeah, Riot. Actually, this band started doing stuff in 2006. This is my first exposure to them.
Yeah, me too.
I've heard of them before and actually heard some tracks before, I think probably in Pandora. Don't tell anybody, all of our viewers out there, don't tell anybody that I listen to Pandora. I want to do a special sometime about how much I hate Pandora. That's just
okay.
me. But about The Orchard, which is a cool album title.
Yeah.
Tom, I'm just going to let you take it away and tell them what you think.
Okay, well, first off, Riot, some important things to know. I think when you first listen to this, you're going to think overwhelmingly that this sounds like Vampire Weekend. If you listened to this before Vampire Weekend, then you probably thought that about Vampire Weekend in relation to Riot.
Very good call.
Either way, the vocalist, I can't think of the guy's name in this band. Do you remember? We just looked it up a little bit ago.
It was like, I don't remember. It's like Max or something.
I'm so dumb. Anyway,
Mighty Max.
Him and Ezra from Vampire Weekend, I guess, actually went to school together. They have a project called Discovery. They released an album, I think maybe last year. They've been working on music together for a while, so their vocal styles are very similar. But there's definitely difference in the sound of the rest of the instrumentals. And that is mainly from the strings in this band and the fact that they're not nearly as spastic as Vampire Weekend. Yeah. They're not as crazy all over the place with the guitars. This is led a lot by the strings, which are actually part of the band. They didn't just do one of those things where they said, hey, let's hire some string players and have them go nuts through this entire album to try to get a mood that we can't get through our regular band members. No, they didn't do that. They actually are part of the band, so it makes a lot more sense. And I'm glad of that. I was very relieved to hear that, because I was like, God damn it, if they just hired some string players so that they could sound really artsy and you know, dramatic. Yeah, exactly.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I would have been pissed. So, that being said, that's not the case here, and it's a very nice, pleasing sound. My big complaints, if you watch our recent episode of Matt and Kim's album Sidewalks, I actually had very much similar complaints. This album is 10 tracks, and while the sound is cool, they just didn't do a lot with it. It's kind of the same thing over and over again. They've got the female vocalist on track 6, and that's kind of a cool mix-up, but other than that, I mean, when you have the strings going all the time, and the vocalist who doesn't really step outside of his safety zone as far as his delivery goes, then what do you have? Well, you have an album that's good, but not great. You have an album that has a consistent sound, but doesn't really bother to experiment or be adventurous.
Yeah, and I feel very similarly, Tom. I feel like as far as the instrumentation goes, they're very comfortable in what their band's sound is. The overall sound of the album is very cohesive, but I feel like they don't have a lot of control over it. And I predicted that this was going to be a band that was known for their live show, and I was right. I looked it up. And that's how they got famous, is by playing lots of live shows. And they're known for their live performance, and their song structures emulate live performances to the fact that they go on. Track 5, just it sounds like Vampire Weekend, but just less aggressive in the crazy songwriting, and it's just a very nice live sound, and it builds and builds and builds until the end, like a lot of live bands do when they're making a really moving song that they play live. But then they just fade it out at the end, and it's in the middle of the album, and it doesn't make any sense, and it just sounds, the entire song just sounded like they just had no control over it, like it was just this thing that was happening, and they were jamming out, and it just no control. I like control over sound. If you can't control your sound, then what the hell are you doing recording? Because seriously, go play a live show. I mean, make a live album. Don't record an album and not have any control over what you're doing. It just doesn't make any sense. Overall, though, I felt like some of the pieces on this music were very beautiful and aesthetic, and I really got into it. Except there were a couple times I couldn't hear it, and here's why: the vocalist doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He has a nice voice. It's Vampire Weekend, you know. They like Tom said and mentioned earlier, but I felt like sometimes, and this might just be pure bias, but I'm not gonna hide it because this is VIMTV. I feel like the vocalist sometimes got so carried away and just made these vocal parts that didn't mesh with some of the really cool and beautiful instrumental parts that were going on. And I felt like at times some of those tracks and some of those spots in the track might have actually been stronger had the vocalist just shut the hell up and not said anything or saying anything, and it would have sounded better. But that was in spots, and I don't like that. It pisses me off because I feel like you should always be highlighting your best quality of your music, and when things aren't meshing, it shows that you didn't take enough time to go through your album and listen to it before you released it and really care about the craft and the direction that you wanted and the message that you wanted to send people. This just sounds like, everything from the cover of the album to just the overall just production just sounds like they picked it up, went in, hooked it up, had some guy, sound engineer, produce it, and then just hit record. And that was it. And then they just threw it on the album. And I'm sure some people like this. It'll sound great on Pandora, but as an album, I just don't feel like this really kills it. Now, that being said, beautiful pieces. I'm going to give it some credit for that.
And it's really true. I mean, the thing you said about the vocal parts not really meshing up with the instrumentals, that's definitely there. I didn't think it was too overwhelming, but really to me it was just, this was another one of those where, kind of like what we said about Hey Marseille, I feel like he didn't really sell it.
Good call.
I feel like he didn't really put himself into it. He was just kind of being a pretty voice. And he wrote some good parts, he wrote some decent lyrics, and he does have a pretty voice, but it's just like, I don't feel it. I feel more moved by the bass, guitar, strings, and drums than I do his vocal delivery.
And anytime that you make beautiful music, you may want to think or at least think about putting vocals to it, because I mean, if you're making some pieces that are really beautiful, you could ruin it by putting vocals on that don't complement it. I mean, it has to be complementary. Look at what post-rock can do. Look at the band Saxon Shore and the fact that they're able to make such good moving albums without vocals. Why can't other bands do it? Some of these indie bands just don't get it. And I feel like at times Riot just doesn't get it on the Orchard. Now, I'm going to keep backing out of my accusations here, because some of these pieces are really good, and I like them, and I'm going to like some of these songs a lot for a long time. Overall, I feel like this is a 70 album for me. It's on the cusp of being needs work, but it's good enough that I like it.
I'm going to go 72. I know that I had some bad things to say, but the deal is, this is just another case where the sound is so pleasing to listen to that some of what it lacks is made up for by that. So I'm really excited to hear these guys take that sound and do something more adventurous and more believable with it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. But what do you guys think? Do you guys see what we're saying about the vocals maybe not selling it or kind of covering up some of the beautiful instrumentation going on? Or do you love it? I mean, what would you guys give this album? Tell us at our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic or velocitiesandmusic.com. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.